Buying a home in the Bay Area feels impossible, right? The old rules like spending 3 times your salary on a house, they don't really apply here. In Alameda County, the median home price is over $1 million. In Contra Costa, it's closer to 900,000. So instead of generic rules, let's break down what different incomes can actually get you in Alameda and Contra Costa right now. And once you see the full breakdown, you'll be able to take the same approach and apply it to your own situation wherever you're looking to buy, whether you're here in the Bay Area or beyond. And here's what we'll do. At the end, I'll also walk you through a real home for sale in Hayward and show you exactly what kind of income and debt load it would take to afford it. Plus, I'll share the real secret behind how many buyers here are able to compete at these prices.
You might be surprised.
Now, before we run the numbers, let me explain how affordability is usually measured. The first most lenders use is the 28-36 rule. This means lenders don't want your mortgage payment to be more than 28% of your gross income, and they don't want all your debts combined, mortgage, car loans, student loans, credit cards, to be more than 36%. The second is the 30% rule, which is more of a budgeting guideline. It says you should aim to keep all your housing costs under 30% of your income. And then there's the 30-33 rule, which is even stricter. It says you should spend no more than 30% of your income on housing. You should have 30% of your home's purchase price in cash. And you shouldn't buy a home that costs more than 3 times your annual salary. Now, in the Bay Area, that rule is basically impossible, but it shows just how far off affordability is here. And finally, if you follow Dave Ramsey's advice, he makes it even tougher. He says you should only get a 15-year fixed mortgage and put down at least 20% down payment and keep the payment under 25% of your take-home pay. That might work fine in low-cost parts of the country, but here in the Bay Area, almost no one could buy under these rules. Okay, let's start with a household income of about $125,000. That's roughly the median household income in Alameda and Contra Costa counties according to the US Census. That breaks down to about $10,400 a month before taxes. Using the 28% rule, that's about $2,900 a month for housing. At 36%, you could stretch closer to $3,700 a month if you don't have any other debts. So let's put this into perspective. Say you wanted to buy $1 million home on a $125,000 income. Even if you had $200,000 down payment, you'd still be left with an $800,000 loan. At today's 6.5% rates, that's roughly a $5,000 mortgage payment. Once you add property taxes and insurance, you're closer to $6,000 a month, well above both the 28% and 36% limits. Now, the 30-33 rule would cap you at $375,000, 3 times your income, which doesn't buy much here. But to be fair, there are properties under $375,000, like condos, mobile homes, townhomes, and even some single-family homes. The trade-off is they're usually not in the areas most buyers are targeting, or they may need significant work. And if you follow Dave Ramsey's guideline, it gets even stricter. He'd want your payment under 25% of your take-home pay and on a 15-year loan with 20% down payment. At $125,000, that limits you to something much lower than we just calculated, basically keeping you out of most Bay Area markets. So in reality, in Alameda County, this income might get you into a small condo, a townhome, or maybe even a detached home in certain parts of Oakland. In Contra Costa, you'll find more options at this price point. Starter homes in Richmond, San Pablo, Pittsburgh, or parts of Concord. Again, the challenge is while these homes fit the budget, they're not always in the neighborhoods most buyers have at the top of their list. By the way, if you're finding this breakdown helpful, hit that like button and subscribe. I share Bay Area housing updates all the time so you can stay ahead of the market. Now let's bump it up to a $200,000 household income. That works out to about $16,600 a month before taxes. Using the 28% rule, you'd qualify for about $4,600 a month toward housing. At 36%, more like $6,000 a month if you don't have any other debt. Again, to put that into perspective, Say you wanted to buy $1 million home with 20% down, you'd be financing $800,000. At today's 6.5 rates, that's about $5,000 mortgage payment. Add in taxes, insurance, and you're closer to $6,000 a month. That lines up with the 2836 limits for a $200,000 income. So unlike the 125K tier, this is where things start to look more realistic. With the 30-33 rule, that would cap you to $600,000, 3 times your income, which is still well below Alameda's $1 million median. That's why it just doesn't hold up here. And again, if we go to follow Dave Ramsey's guideline, you'd be limited to about 25% of your take-home pay on a 15-year loan with 20% down payment. That would cut your budget down to closer to $3,500 up to $4,000 a month, which still doesn't stretch far in this market. So the reality, at this income level, you finally have a shot at single-family homes in parts of Contra Costa and Alameda in a decent neighborhood. You're not at the top of the market by any means, but you've got more flexibility than at 125K, and that opens doors to areas that feel like real options for a lot of buyers. Now let's look at the household income of about $300,000. That breaks down to around $25,000 a month before taxes. At the 28% rule, you'd qualify for about $7,000 a month in housing. At 36%, closer to $9,000 if you don't have any other debts. So let's put this into perspective. Say you wanted to buy a $1.3 million home with 20% down, you'd be financing about $1,040,000. At today's 6.5 rates, that's roughly a $6,600 monthly mortgage payment. Add in taxes and insurance, and you're closer to $7,900 a month total. That's a little above the 28% guideline, but still under the 36% cap. So technically within range if you don't have any other debts. Now, with the 30-33 rule, you would still be limited to about $900,000, which barely clears the median price in Contra Costa and falls way short of Alameda, but at least you're in the ballpark. And again, under Dave Ramsey's plan, you'd again be held to about 25% of your take-home pay on a 15-year loan, which cuts your budget back down to $5,000 to $5,500 a month range. That would support a loan closer to $900,000, well below the 1.3 million homes many Bay Area buyers are chasing. So in reality, at this income level, you finally have meaningful options both in Alameda and Contra Costa. Single-family homes in well-established neighborhoods, better schools, and closer commutes start to come in within reach. You're still competing in a tough market, but unlike the lower tiers, you're shopping in the same price bracket as a large share of Bay Area buyers. Now let's take a real-world example to see how this plays out. Here's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home with a 2-car garage in Hayward. It's 3740 Oaks Drive, listed at about $1,050,000. Let's assume our buyer has 20% down. That's about $210,000. The loan would be $840,000. At today's 6.5% rates, the mortgage comes out to about $5,300 a month. Add in property taxes, about $960, and insurance, around $150, and you're closer to $6,400 a month in total housing costs. Now let's add in some debts that our borrower has. They pay $350 a month for credit cards, $500 for car payments, and $400 for student loans. That's another $1,200 in payments. Altogether, this household would be carrying about $7,600 a month in housing and debts. On a $125,000 income, the 36% cap is only about $3,700 a month. This home is way out of reach. On a $200,000 income, the 36% cap is about $6,000 a month. Still short, you'd be about $1,600 over. On a $300,000 income, the 36% cap is about $9,000 per month. Here, the numbers finally work. Now let's check it against the stricter rules. The 30-33 rule, 3 times a $200,000 income caps you at $600,000, and 3 times the $300,000 income caps you at the $900,000 range. Either way, you fall short of the $1 million loan amount. That rule just doesn't apply here. Now, Dave Ramsey's rule, 25% of your take-home pay, 15%, 15-year mortgage, 20% down payment. On a $300,000 income, your max payment would be about $5,000 to $5,500 a month. That only supports a loan of $850,000 to $900,000 range, which again leaves you short of affording this house. So the bottom line here is this. By the lender's 2836 rule, this home works at a $300,000 income, but it falls under both the 3033 rule and Dave Ramsey's super strict plan or rule, whatever you call it. So how are the buyers making it happen? Here's the secret. It's not just about salaries in the Bay Area. A huge part of affordability comes from equity compensation. Things like stock options, restricted stock units, or big bonuses that buyers use for down payments or to qualify for larger loans. And it's also why the market slows down when tech gets uncertain. With AI business disruptions and stock prices bouncing all around, people get cautious. Sometimes it's not even the reality, it's just the perception. And that pause shows up in the housing activity. At the end of the day, though, you are the only one who can decide what's right for you. Whether you follow Dave Ramsey's super strict plan or one of the other rules, it all comes down to what you're comfortable with. The rules are there just as guidelines, but your financial situation, your comfort level, and your goals matter more. And if you're a first-time homebuyer trying to make sense of all this, I put together a free first-time buyer guide and a house hunting tour guide. The links are down below. Grab them. They'll give you a solid head start in planning your next move.